Picture this. It's the early 1700s. You are a boy of 4 years old, and you arrive in Europe as a gift from the Dutch West India Company to a royal family in Germany. At the age of 4, Amo was taken from his homeland of the Gold Coast, present-day Ghana, and carried across the sea by the Dutch West India Company. He did not arrive in Europe as a student or a traveler, but as property, presented as a gift to Duke Anton Ulrich of Braunschweig-Wolfenbüttel. The Duke adopted him, baptizing him Anton Wilhelm in 1708. His African identity was stripped away, replaced with baptism and a new name, Anton Wilhelm Amo. Europe believed it had claimed his body. What it did not anticipate was his mind. On the shores of the Gold Coast in present-day Ghana in the 18th century, life pulsed with tradition and a rich oral heritage. For a boy like Amo, born into a respected family within the Akan culture, the seeds of intellectual inquiry were sown early. At about 4 years old, the child was seized and transported across the Atlantic, not as a student, not as a guest, but as property. First to the Netherlands, then presented as a gift to a German duke by the Dutch West India Company. His African name was erased. He was baptized and renamed Anton Wilhelm Amo. Unlike most Africans taken to Europe in his era, Amo was granted access to formal education. Due to the generosity and patronage of Duke Anton and others like Johannes Peter von Ludwig, he was educated at the great universities of Halle, Wittenberg, and Jena, intellectual powerhouses at the heart of Europe's Enlightenment. He studied Latin, Greek, logic, law, and philosophy. To arrive in Wittenberg in the 1920s was to step into the very crucible of the Enlightenment. It was a place where ideas were forged in public debate, where theology and philosophy were being interrogated like never before. And there, surrounded by men who believed Africans were inferior, Amo did the unthinkable. He out-thought them. In 1734, Anton Wilhelm Amo became the first African known to earn a doctorate in philosophy in Europe. Amo would begin to formulate his own profound questions. Amo did not simply repeat European ideas, he challenged them. In his most radical work, On the Impassivity of the Human Mind, Amo challenged the very foundations of how philosophers at that time understood consciousness. Amo confronted René Descartes, one of Europe's most celebrated philosophers. Descartes claimed the mind feels pain. Amo said, no. The body feels, the mind perceives, it thinks, it reasons. These are functions of pure intellect. Sensations, feelings, these are the body's language, not the soul's. He wasn't denying the existence of feelings, but asserting that the core of our conscious identity, our ability to be rational agents, was something more fundamental and perhaps more detached. This was not just philosophy. This was an African intellect reshaping European thought from the inside. He said, the soul, through the senses, experiences the world and imbues it with meaning. The body is the bridge, the translator between our inner life and the external reality. He dared to suggest that our perception of reality was a co-creation, a partnership between the immaterial mind and the material universe. At a time when Europe wrestled with the tension between faith and a rising scientific worldview, Amo was already shaping ideas that would not fully emerge until modern phenomenology, centuries later. And perhaps his most groundbreaking act was his first thesis, The Rights of Moors in Europe. While the text is lost to history, we know its core argument through contemporary records. Amo used Roman law to argue that because African kings were once allies of Rome, their descendants could not be legally enslaved. And in another work, Amo argued something even more dangerous. that Africans were rational beings, that enslavement violated natural law, that black people in Europe deserved legal rights and dignity. In an age built on racial hierarchy, Amo spoke truth with precision. But Europe has always struggled with black excellence. He was an anomaly, an outsider in spaces designed to exclude him, yet he persisted. This resilience is as much a part of his legacy as his philosophical contributions. The academic institutions of the time were bastions of established thought, often deeply resistant to ideas that challenged their European-centric worldview. Imagine presenting your life's work, your philosophical breakthroughs, only to be met with polite indifference, or worse, subtle condescension, simply because of the color of your skin. Imagine being the most educated man in the room, yet never allowed to belong in it. From 1735 to 1747, Amo lectured on metaphysics and law at Halle and later at the University of Jena, becoming the first African professor in Central Europe. His lectures sparked fierce debates, especially with opponents of Leibnizian philosophy. As Amo's patrons died, protection faded, racism hardened, isolation grew. By the 1740s, Dr. Anton Wilhelm Amo vanished from European academic life, not because his mind failed, but because Europe could not accept what he represented, a living contradiction. In 1743, Johannes Peter von Ludwig died. Ludwig was a leading scholar and chancellor of the University of Halle and played a pivotal role in supporting and advancing Amo's academic career in Germany. Amo's position became untenable. He was targeted by satirical plays and xenophobic insults. Eventually, Dr. Amo returned to the Gold Coast in 1747, back to the land that had first shaped him. Some say he lived quietly near Axim, reflecting, teaching, thinking. No monuments, no applause, no preserved manuscripts waiting in African libraries. History fell silent. But silence does not mean absence. In the late 1750s, Dr. Amo passed on. He was buried in a town called Shama in 1759. For centuries, Amo was a footnote. Today, he is a symbol. He reminds us that the Enlightenment was never the exclusive property of one continent. He was a man who lived between two worlds, proving that the pursuit of truth knows no borders. His life was his greatest argument, that the mind is free, impassive, and belongs to no one but itself. In closing, Amo's questioning of the innate nature of the soul, his assertion that consciousness is tied to the physical body, was not just a philosophical novelty for the 18th century. It was a radical departure, a seed planted for future dialogues on mind-body dualism, artificial intelligence, and even the very definition of personhood. Monuments to Amo now stand in both Germany and Ghana, testaments to a life that bridged continents. I seek knowledge not to escape my past, but to illuminate the path for those who will follow. Amo. Thank you very much for watching. Tell us who you want featured next. Like, subscribe, and share to keep the message alive.